The Toyota Land Cruiser has always been an icon in the off-roading world. Let's go back 30 years and check out this pristine FJ62, and let's see what it was like to check out a Land Cruiser back in 1989.
Oh, what a feeling, value and style. Oh, what a feeling, mile after mile. Oh, what a feeling to drive Toyota.
So as for these late 80s SUVs, there was one in Europe, which was the Land Rover, and then there were three in America, so that was the Explorer, Suburban, and the Wagoneer. And then for Japan, there was this, the Trooper, and the Montero. So in the front of the Land Cruiser, you really see the 80s Toyota look, the late 80s Toyota look, which is something that I really have a soft spot for. And you'll see that the FJ62 Land Cruisers have these sealed beam headlights, and they're separate. So the outside one is for the low beam and the inner one is for the high beam. And then you have turn signals right underneath that, and don't expect any LEDs or anything because this is 1989. But you have these big chrome bumpers over here, which I like. You have this recovery hook that you have on the other side, and then it's just cool how simple things were back then compared to this new Land Cruiser 200 that's rolling around Beverly Hills and Potomac, Maryland. But you have this big grille with the Toyota letters all over, which all the Toyota guys like now. And I just love the looks of it. I love these boxes. So on the side of the Land Cruiser, this is where you really see the size of this vehicle. And then you just look at the new ones, which are just even bigger than this, I'm pretty sure. So looking at the wheels, you have these beautiful OEM chrome steel wheels with I really like how they look on it. They're 15s, and they just really give it a really good looking stance. Other people lift them and put 33s or whatever on them, but this is what it would look like if it rolled right out of the showroom, so that just makes it so much better. You can also see that you have manual locking hubs on the wheels too, which is something that my Tacoma has, which is kind of cool. And I'll go over the four-wheel drive stuff when we get inside. But since I mentioned the chrome wheels, there's just a bunch of nice little touches of chrome all over the Land Cruiser. You have chrome mirror caps on the side. You have these chrome vents over here. You have this chrome strip which goes all the way underneath the truck. Chrome door handles. It just really looks good, and I like the chrome. Other people just black everything out, but I don't like that. Towards the rear end of the Land Cruiser, you also see more of that 80s Toyota and boxy look. You have the same metal bumpers that you have in the front. I love metal bumpers. And also you have the split tailgate. So I was told that a lot of people end up just pulling the hatch like this, but you actually have to push the keyhole and then it lifts up. And then just like the new Land Cruisers, actually the new Land Cruisers have the same split tailgate too. So you have to lift the top and then pull this, and then it drops like this. And then even with the second row up, you have a lot of space back here. You could fit your whole family on an overland off-road trip and all of their gear and camping stuff, and you know what I mean. But it's also the ultimate tailgating vehicle for 1989. You could sit back here and it could be raining or really sunny and you have this protection over you. It's just the ultimate package, and I really like this. I think the Range Rovers had this too. So if you're looking into the trunk of the Land Cruiser, there's not much like other newer cars, they have power outlets and all this crazy stuff in the back, but you have two speakers in the back, which they're there, and you also have this little compartment here, which I believe is for the spare tire and tools and stuff, but there's not really anything else. So for the FJ60s and 62s, you couldn't get a third row in them. They just never came with one. But the LC80s, the 91 to 98, I think, or 97, those came with the flip-up third row. Those were the first ones to do that. But no third row in the Land Cruisers of this era. Another thing that just makes me love how simple these 80s and 90s trucks are is that you can even see the screw heads. My Tacoma is the same way. You can just easily unscrew the taillight and then replace bulbs. You don't have to take apart interior panels or whatever. You can just easily replace, and that's just what I like about how simple older vehicles are. Now, getting into the inside of the Land Cruiser, you can just start seeing how the Land Cruiser was in the 80s on the inside. There's just everything is here for a purpose, and there's nothing like, there's no stupid lines and things how new cars have it. You can see the door panel. I don't know how to describe it. It's like a soft touch vinyl material, I'm pretty sure, but you have this fabric material on the sides. All 4 windows are electric. That's pretty cool. So, and I believe if this is the driver's window, it's auto down too. But you have the window locks, the door locks, and the power mirror controls are right there. This one controls the interior illumination. This knob controls the adjustable steering wheel. And then this is the hood release over here, and then the fuel release is right here. Looking at the seat, it's a manual driver and passenger side seat. You couldn't get electric seats on these just yet. It's a pretty basic seat. I mean, this is what you'd see on most 80s SUVs. You either see 2 buckets or a whole bench in the front. I prefer the buckets just because they're usually a little bit more comfortable, but it's a manual seat, so you slide it with this lever thing over here, and then you recline it with this. There's no lumbar or anything like the new Land Cruiser has today. Even looking at the steering wheel, it's just 80s Toyota. My Tacoma, well, it's a 97, but my Tacoma has the same kind of looking steering wheel, but there's no buttons, there's no adaptive cruise control, there's no cruise control at all on this, but it's just so simple and just good. Looking at the gauges, it's also all simple 80s Toyota. The gauges aren't that hard to read. So on the left, you have a lot of little things over here. So you have your coolant temperature on the top left, fuel gauge on the top right, voltage meter on the bottom right, and oil pressure on the bottom left. And in the center, you have a small tachometer, and on the right, you have your speedometer. And yes, this Land Cruiser has 310,000 miles, and I mean, look at how clean it is. So once you're inside and settled in the Land Cruiser, you just get more of that simplicity and function over form that you'll see on a lot of 80s Japanese vehicles. All the climate controls are really simple. It's a single zone unit, nothing fancy. You're not going to see automatic temperature control, automatic fan speed. It's all just these knobs over here. They still feel actually pretty good, and of course everything's going to be manual. Even these, being 30 years old, feel really good. You also have the original radio and tape deck, and just even the buttons here feel really good quality. There's nothing that feels cheap, and I'm pretty sure that was Toyota's goal back in the 80s, to really set them apart from the American counterparts like the Wagoneer and Suburban of the neighborhoods back then. Since this is an 80s vehicle, you do have the ashtray over here and a cigarette lighter. Even cars in 2011 had ashtrays and cigarette lighters, so you can't really complain about that. The rear wiper controls are right down on the dash as well, so there's not really any adjustability for that. You can turn on the rear washer and just turn it on intermittent. You also have the rear defroster right next to that, and then over 2 buttons you can actually raise and lower the electric antenna, which, let me put you in this perspective. You're going off-roading in a pretty branchy and woodlands environment, and you don't want your antenna to get snapped off if it's just pretty rigid. You can just roll it down, because I really doubt that you're going to be using your radio in the middle of nowhere like you're going to get any service. Also in the Land Cruiser, more of that simplicity. There's no huge center consoles or under head consoles or overhead consoles. You have this plain old shifter, and it was a 4-speed automatic with overdrive, so you know, the 3-speed, but just even the shifter, the way how it looks, it's really basic. It's just basically a T with a button on the end of it. I mean, they really weren't thinking about looking fancy and prestigious as they are now, and it still doesn't look ugly. Nothing in this looks ugly. It's just very functional. Even the 4-wheel drive. Now, speaking about that, since this does have manual locking hubs, what you have to do is get out, just like my truck. You have to get out, lock the hubs, press this H4 button over here, which puts it in 4 high. And then if you want to go over to 4 low, you put yourself in neutral and then pull all the way down. So that's how the 4-wheel drive works with this. And I like the simplicity of it. Even my truck is the same way. There's just a lot less stuff to break. In the middle of the 2 seats, you have a bunch of coin holders. You could put a lot of quarters in there. And then you have a little tray that you can put, well, tissues in this example. Or now you could put your phone or whatever you'd put in there, your wallet or whatever. And then in the center console, there's no armrest, which is something that I literally just noticed, because I'm like, there's nowhere to put my arm. But you have a center console, which I mean, it's 30 years old, it's kind of jiggly, but it's not too bad. And then you have a little tray on top of it that you can put, I don't know, pens or whatever, something that doesn't really fly around on it too much. Now, looking at the glove box, before that, you have an O handle over here. So if you're the passenger and then your driver is being a little bit aggressive off-road, like some Aussie, you have something to hold on to. And then the glove box, the way how it opens is actually pretty interesting. It's a little knob and you turn it to the left and that unlocks it, well, unlatches it, and then that just folds down. So inside it's pretty shallow, but it goes down pretty deep. You could fit all of the maps that you'd need, well, whatever people carry in 1989. I mean, I'm a 2000s baby, so I have no idea. The seats, they're not uncomfortable, but just like my truck, after probably an hour of driving, you'd probably start feeling how it is. So in the rear seat of the Land Cruiser, getting in, step in height, I mean, it's not too bad. It's not that high, it's not lifted or anything, it's pretty stock. The rear bench is pretty soft, actually. I'm pretty surprised. I like sunk into it, kind of, so that's kind of interesting. Headroom, oh god, I have a lot of headroom. Is kind of what I would expect from a truck-based SUV from this era. My knees are up kind of pretty high. There's no map pockets on the seats. The rear passengers do have heat control. It's not like a second or third climate control, but they do have the ability to control the heat. So there's a high and low button in the center console, which you can change, I believe, the fan speed. There's a little knob in the back here, which you can slide it. So I believe that's more heat or less heat. I'm just guessing. There's no center armrest in the rear seats, but the rear seat does fold down. This bottom part folds down. The headrests go in the top side of the bottom part, and then the back folds down, and then you pretty much have a fully enclosed truck on the inside. So under the hood of the 89 Land Cruiser, you have a 4-liter inline 6-cylinder engine. It makes 155 horsepower and 220 pound-feet of torque. And the torque comes in at 3,000 RPM, which is kind of pretty low, but the towing capacity for these was 3,500 pounds. And if I can remember correctly, if you care about fuel economy, if you're buying one now, but if you were buying one in 1989, fuel economy was 12 in the city and 19 on the highway. That's not as bad as I was expecting, but I don't know how often people would be seeing 19 on it, unless if you're probably driving down to Florida or something, but that's what it is. But this is a bulletproof engine. This has 300,000 miles on it, and it's the original engine on it. And I think that's just really spectacular that Toyota just made these awesome engines with, I mean, it's not like a sports car SUV, but it's definitely adequate for even the size of it. I think this was 4,200 pounds. For Virginia roads like this, it's fine. So I had the opportunity to drive this FJ62, but unfortunately I didn't have the right equipment to mount the camera up on the dash, so I'm just going to tell you how it drove. This little phrase was the owner's words, not mine. This thing drives like a tractor. Even I thought that too. I mean, it makes my Tacoma feel like a Mercedes compared to how that thing drove, but I'm not complaining. The experience you get when you drive this thing is just so rewarding. I mean, just, you feel cool when you're driving it, but you feel like really tall. Just, you really feel like you're sitting on top of the car and not in it. The way how the gauges are, just the way how you sit, you kind of sit really upright, and it's interesting how it feels when you drive it. The engine actually does have a little bit of power to it, so it's not unbearable. Now, why it drives like a tractor is that the steering is just so loose and so vague. I mean, you can move it around like this and it doesn't do anything. It just goes straight. I just think it's entertaining how loose and vague it is. I mean, you have to like really turn the wheel hard and a lot to maneuver around parking spots and parking lots and stuff. So I thought it was funny, but if I think about it, probably all of these other SUVs around this time drove probably similar to that, just really unresponsive. And I don't know, this is like really when trucks were becoming family vehicles, so it was like right in the middle of stuff like a Toyota pickup going to a 4Runner as like the pickup with the camper on it, and then to an actual SUV. So the 80s was kind of like a middle ground for that, I guess. So that's why things were like too rugged, and now things are just too soft. So when you're driving it, the ride actually isn't too bad, but when it's loaded. When it's not loaded, you actually feel the bounciness and the truck-like handling, and the amusement comes in. But overall, I really enjoyed driving the Land Cruiser. It just gives you a cool feeling, like it just anything 80s. It doesn't have to be Toyota, anything old. It just pretty much anything old gives you a cool feeling. And right before I go, I wanted to thank Ed, the owner of this Land Cruiser, for letting me drive it and film it today. I really appreciate it. And one disclaimer, this thing is not for sale. This is also the same owner of the Celica, which is for sale. And if you want information on that, just leave me a comment or an email, and I'll get back to you, and then we could coordinate. And yeah, so it's my time to go, so bye peeps.